Ralph is a very special storyteller. He's very special to our community and to this event. He spoke last year. He told a phenomenal story last year at the Big Easy. And he hasn't been here on the stage for about a year. And we're so happy to have you back, Ralph. So please give him a warm round of applause.
I will not sit for this, Jameson, because the last time I did, I woke up in some stranger's condo in New Jersey wearing only one shoe. I met my Marine last September. His name was Jason. And I had just done some volunteer work, so I was walking down High Street feeling very, very grand and full of myself. Very excited. When this man approached me and asked for some spare change. Oh, spare change? I'm thanking. I gave him a $5. And so I started to walk down the street, and all of a sudden, I felt him tap me on the shoulder. And he said, "I'm so sorry. I've never done this. It's the first time I've ever begged on the street. I just lost my home. I'm living in a shelter and I'm embarrassed." And I said, "Well, if you're going to be embarrassed, you're with the right guy." And he hugged me. And I saw in his face that he just was hungry to talk. So I said, "Here's my phone number. And why don't you give me a call sometime and I'll take you out for coffee." He said, "When?" I said, "Well, I'm busy today till about 7. And he kissed me on the cheek very bravely and walked away. At 6:59, he called. And I couldn't believe it. I thought I'd never hear from this guy, but I said, okay. So he said I could pick him up at this Sunoco station down on West Broad Street in the Bottoms. And I said, fine, I can come get him. And I picked him up and he got in the car and I took him for coffee and donuts and we just really talked and really connected, and it was very, very real and very special. And then I dropped him back there because he said that he had an appointment that he had to keep. So the next day, he called me again, and I really liked him. I said, why not? And I said, let me take you out for dinner. So I picked him up back at the Sunoco station, and I took him out to dinner. And we had a really wonderful, again, very authentic time. And this time, he told me more about his life. He had been in Afghanistan for two tours. He'd been injured. And then he came back, and he had a job, and he had a son who was 3.5 years old. And he lost everything when the factory that he worked in went out of business. And he ended up finally on the street. He'd lost his son. His ex-wife had taken him away. And then I took him back to the Sunoco station. The next day he called, and I said, why don't you're getting a little ripe. Why don't you come over, and we'll wash your clothes, and I'll make you some supper, and you can clean up, and then afterward I'll bring you back down to the Sunoco station. So he came over, and it was just a magical evening. He walked into my apartment, and I was in that process of bringing all of my, this sounds so queer, I was taking all of my summer clothes down. Winter clothes up. And on my $10,000 purple velvet sofa, which I bought once when I had a rich husband in Paris, there were stacks and stacks and stacks of sweaters. And he came and said, what the fuck is this for? I said, those are my sweaters. And he called me Mr. Cashmere. I was gone. Well, we had a wonderful evening. My dog loved him, and my dog, of course, really loved him. Now, I've always said that the things I would never settle for in a man: bad grammar, tattoos, smoking, or chewing gum. This guy did all four at the same time, backwards, in work boots. My dog loved him because he smoked a lot, and every time he smoked, he'd take her out to pee. It was great. Toward the end of the night, it began to literally thunderstorm like you've never heard. And I couldn't take this guy back to the Sunoco station, knowing that he didn't have a place to live. He had told me at that point that he had left the shelter because it was full of bugs and people stealing your things, and he hated it. So I said, why don't you just stay here on the sofa and I'll take you back in the morning? And he said, fine. And we started to talk, and I asked him the stupidest question. I said, when you were in Afghanistan, did you ever kill it? He said, never ask that question. And I went to bed, and he went to sleep on the sofa. And about an hour later, I felt him crawl in my bed behind me. And he began to tell me in this half-druggy, half-sleepy voice about the time he'd spent at war. And you've seen it. It's in the movies right now. The heat and the sound and the smell. And he told me about the transport he was driving when it was blown up by an IED. And he'd lost his best friend. And he was injured. And I found out that because of that injury, he, every single day, had to take a pain pill. He'd lost his insurance. The VA wait was 4 frigging months. So he started to buy on the street. And it was 1 a day. I thought, 1 a day, so it's like vitamins or insulin. What could be the wrong with that? And we just let it go. And while he was in bed with me, I thought, the pots we throw can't always bear the kiln. And the heroes we make can't always bear their shame. And one of us slipped and said, I love you. And it wasn't me. In the morning, I thought he'd be embarrassed or gone. I had no silver to steal, and we could take a sweater. But he was sitting in a chair with my dog in his lap, drinking a glass of juice. And he said, good morning, Mr. Kashmir. And I said, good morning, soldier. And he said, I love you. I said, please, stop. You could not possibly love me. I'm 20 years older than you. He said, I'm 38. They're not going to arrest you for child abuse. I said, I had cancer. I almost died. What would you do if I got sick again? I would take care of you. What would happen if I died? Your dog and I would wrap up in one of your sweaters and we'd sleep together and cry. But you're not even gay. I guess I am now. I want to be with you. And if you want me to prove it, it would be a pleasure. And then he said, a soldier never does there are 2 things a soldier can't take back. Bullets and words. And I love you. My knees buckled. I was Ellen Green singing Suddenly Seymour. I was Blanche Dubois, and he was Stanley Kowalski. And as he sat there in his white t-shirt, I almost fainted, with the little tattoo that said Semper Fi's sticking out from underneath the t-shirt. I walked in the bathroom and he was drawing a pair of boxer shorts, and I almost wept with joy. I thought, if I'm going to live a fucking gay cliche, let it be this one! And then he had to go back to the Bottoms to buy a pill. Now, I, in my head, decided to call it his medicine. And he was going to the clinic. So he was going to the clinic to get his medicine. Now, he was working in a garage, sweeping up and things, and he made enough money every day to buy his pills. And then I, when he came over, would feed him and do all of that. Now, whenever he came over, I would have to drive him back to the Bottoms. Now, it's it's suicidal to let them know that you're gay on the street. When you're working the street, when you're walking the street, it's death. So we had to be very, very careful, and it wasn't a joke. But there were I called them the three muses. There were these three little hookers that I just loved who fell in love with our story like he was Julia Roberts. And they protected us. Now, first there was Pam. Now, Pam, her rule of thumb, you never do anything for free. So I would give her $5, and she would watch to make sure that none of the dangerous people could see when he was getting into my car. And then there was Chit Chat. Now, Chit Chat got her name because except for when she was negotiating a $20 blowjob in the alley, she never said a word. And her way to communicate was... And then there was Birdie. Birdie was this scrawny little junkie. I just kind of loved her, but she was the queen of the block because she had monthly income from the state because she had multiple personality disorder. Now, whenever Jason would get in the car, she'd hop right in. And you never knew who it was, but she'd put a voice on, I should buy me some milk, and she'd be this, and I'd say, what do you want? And she'd say, could you drive me across town to see my sugar daddy, and he'll give me money to buy my dope. And I'll try to get him off really fast. I know some tricks. So, Jason and I decided it was a good time to visit. So we sit in the car, and she'd get him off, and they'd take her back. So we made this kind of odd, funny little family. I started pushing the grocery cart around. And then all of a sudden in it was gallons of milk and boxes of really colorful cereal and Mountain Dew. He had made a honeydew list. And he saw my apartment, and there was a list: fix the air conditioner, fix the faucet, change the spark plugs, program the damn remote. And we had a really lovely time for a while. But then what happened, and I didn't really know about pills. One, to keep you normal, doesn't last. And two, is needed for the pain. He lost the job, they got rid of the job at the garage, and so he started working at these awful day labor jobs. Now this guy had worked and made a very good living, had a house and a car and a truck, everything up until very recently, and here he was going to get day labor. And he had to be there at 5 o'clock every single morning before the buses started. So I would drop him off, and by this time he was staying at Birdie's, and she let him stay there because he'd sort of protect her if her tricks got rough. But he'd have to walk 2.5 miles up the hill and 2.5 miles back to make minimum wage, doing awful things like shoveling tar and being in the heat and the rain. It was really bad. It was really kind of bad for his pride. And then he started on the second pill a day, 2 for the pain. He could barely cover those by the days he was working. But what was happening is if they called him off and there was no work, there was no money. But the pill and the need for the pill kept going on. And even though he never asked, I'd say, this one's on me. I'll pay you back, I promise. I'll pay you back, I promise. Well, those $20 started getting more and more often and more and more often. And I had no money. You know, I had just spent $3,000 on my car, and my dog had been to the vet, and you know, but I kept coming through with it. But then every time I think it'd be over, I'd be pissed, he'd come over, and it would be so dear, It'd be so dear. He would change a light bulb and I fell. We'd watch Rachel Maddow, and we'd watch Rachel Maddow because the election was coming, and he hated it. And then I watched Cops, and I hated it. But it was love. Then he had to work at the egg farm. The egg farm is as low as you can go on the street. It's the job they give the lowest of the low, the men who are desperate to raise a buck to buy themselves a pill or a fix, or to feed their kid or buy diapers. It's the worst. You spend 12 hours covered with chicken shit, and he came home that night utterly defeated. And 2 for the pain didn't do it. He disappeared for a couple of days. He called his mother, and he went to stay with her, and he begged his ex-wife to let him see his child, and she said no. Failure, you fucking junkie. And then he found the 3rd pill. His mother gave him the money. 1 to stay normal, 2 for the pain, 3 for the nightmare stuck in your brain. 1 for the normal, 2 for the pain, 3 to be stuck in your brain, stuck in your brain. He called me 2 days later, and I picked him up, and he was nodding and drooling, and he was talking about his kid and everything he lost. And I just didn't know what to do. So I said, honey, why don't you just go to bed? And he said, nobody ever fucking tells me what to do, ever! I'd lost it. I said, why don't I take you down to, maybe we should take you to see Birdie. Let's take you to see Birdie. And he said, you can't get me there fast enough. And for the next 20 minutes, as he was packing the few meager things I bought for him at the Goodwill, just so we had things to wear, an old pair of boots, a hoodie, he harangued me. And all of his fear of failure and my control and living under my roof and on and on and on and on and on. And he said, you're a disgusting, manipulative old faggot. And you embarrass me on the street and discuss me in the bedroom. Now, I will cop to manipulative. But even when he said it, his eyes said, make me stop. Make me stop. I said I would drive him back down to the Bottoms, and he didn't say a word. And when we got there, I said, I have to know, Jason. I have to know. Were you only using me? And he looked me right in the eye and said, maybe I should ask you the same thing. And then he leaned over and he whispered in my ear, I'm sorry I didn't program the remote. And then he kissed me bravely on Broad Street and disappeared into the darkness, the way that people who live in the edges know how to do. Well, I got home, and I was so glad he was gone. And there was no trace of him, except for a half-eaten box of cereal that had a leprechaun on the front. He called the next day, like I knew he would. I love you, I'm sorry, please get me. It was this. And I said, Jason, I'm finished. You called me faggot. Bullets and words. Bertie called a few days later. They were all worried about him. They hadn't seen him. And I said that he and I had ended badly. And she said, Ralph, you gotta know, honey, he really loves you. But we're all junkies down here. And the dope always wins. She called 2 weeks later and said that Jason, the buzz on the street, of course, was that Jason had gone through a detox. It was really rough on him, she said. And then he had entered a evangelical Christian rehab center for homeless men, where for 6 months you work full-time in their processing plant, and they give you a cot and hot food, counseling, their kind of counseling with a big dose of shame and homophobia, and lots and lots and lots of Jesus. But I say if Jesus is the man he needs to get himself on the road to being whole, then I will say, praise the Lord. But for me, I was becoming the bastard son of Truman Capote and Maya Angelou, sitting in my armchair throwing off clever bon mots on one side and offering the world unsolicited grand advice on the other. I was lonely and numb. And then one day, a handsome soldier with no home and a pocket full of regrets smiled and kissed me very bravely right there on High Street. And like a sniper with a silencer, he dented my heart. And that dent became a fissure, and the fissure a fracture, and the fracture a fountain of love and possibility. So I say, thank you, Jason. Take care, and semper fi.